A commoner kid with zero noble blood, zero certification, zero anything, walks into the most elite magic academy on the continent and breaks every record they've kept for 100 years. A patriarch of one of the most powerful noble houses on the continent orders a teenager executed, not for attacking anyone, not for stealing, for sitting next to his son. A prodigy savant who has spent his entire life worshipping numbers and calculations gets beaten, by 6 points, by a boy who stopped counting entirely. And then there's this. 400 students, falling, no net, no safety spell, no time. One boy throws his soul into the void to catch every single one of them, and his heart stops. That's the story we're getting into today. Rewind all the way back, because before any of that, there was a baby in a stable, a woodcutter who couldn't walk away, and a kid who was never supposed to touch magic at all. His name is Shirone Aryan, and nobody saw him coming. The forest outside a quiet village. Early morning. A woodcutter named Vincent is heading out for another ordinary day of work when he finds something that is absolutely not ordinary. A newborn baby, alone, wrapped in cloth, tucked into the corner of a stable, like someone left him there on purpose and walked away without looking back. Vincent doesn't call the authorities, doesn't ask around town. He picks the baby up, carries him home, and shows him to his wife Olena. They name him Shirone. Now, Vincent and Olena aren't wealthy, they're not noble, they're not connected to anyone important. They're a woodcutter and his wife in a small village, and they have just decided to raise a child they found in a barn, and they are going to pour everything they have into him. Shirone grows up small, curious, and relentlessly attentive to everything around him. He notices things other kids don't. The exact moment the wind changes direction, the precise number of droplets in a patch of rain. He can't explain why he notices these things, he just does. Then one afternoon, when Shirone is around 6 years old, something happens that changes the entire direction of his life. A man passes through the village, older, calm, with the kind of presence that makes people stop talking when he walks into a room. He pauses near the village square and, almost casually, gives a small demonstration of magic to the children gathered around him. He explains the concept of a spiritual zone, a sphere of mental energy that a trained mage can project outward from their body, allowing them to perceive and manipulate the space around them with extraordinary precision. He says a skilled mage can feel the exact number of leaves on a tree from 200 meters away. Not guess, feel. Each one, individually, without looking. Every other kid thinks that's pretty cool and moves on. Shirone stands there and thinks, that's exactly what I already do. The man's name is Alpheus. He's the headmaster of Alpheus Magic Academy, one of the most prestigious magic institutions on the continent. He's passing through this village for reasons that, at this point, he hasn't shared with anyone. But he notices the 6-year-old staring at him with an expression that isn't wonder or confusion. It's recognition. He doesn't say anything to Shirone that day, but he doesn't forget him either. Shirone goes home and starts practicing. Without any formal training, without any textbook, without any instructor, he starts reaching for that zone on his own. It takes time. It takes a lot of failed attempts and headaches and moments of absolute nothing. But eventually, sitting in his family's small house while rain falls outside, he finds it. The zone opens, and it is enormous. Shirone has no frame of reference for how large a spiritual zone is supposed to be at his age and level. But we do, from context. Most beginning students project a zone of maybe 4 or 5 meters. Advanced students in their teens push 8 or 10. Shirone, untrained, age 6, with no guidance whatsoever, projects 20 meters on his first real attempt. The rain stops falling chaotically and organizes itself around him. Every droplet within his zone holds still for a half second, suspended in perfect perception before continuing down. The neighbors think it's a weather anomaly. Vincent watches from the doorway and doesn't say a word. He just watches his son, standing in the rain, perfectly calm, and realizes something has changed. Shirone is 11 when Vincent finally tells him the truth, partial truth, about his origins. That they found him, that they don't know where he came from. Vincent says it haltingly, carefully, terrified of how Shirone will react. Shirone's reaction is to hug him, because as far as Shirone is concerned, Vincent and Olena are his parents. Not biologically, not legally, not on any official document anywhere, but in every way that actually matters, They are his family, and he is not giving that up for anything. That part matters. Remember it. It comes back. Alpheus reaches the far end of the bridge at the moment Shirone falls. He does not stop walking. This is not coldness. Alpheus has seen what Shirone just did. His zone, fully unsealed, reads the entire canyon in a single extension. And he knows the photon field is holding, knows the students are caught, knows the cost that was paid for it. He carries that knowledge and keeps walking, because there is one thing left on this bridge that requires his attention, and Shirone's survival depends on ending it quickly. Arcane is waiting. They look at each other across the bridge's final span, and there is a specific quality to the silence between them. The kind that only forms between people who have shared history long enough that everything unsaid has weight. Arcane speaks first. He talks about 40 years, about burning, about what it means to survive something that was supposed to kill you and spend the intervening decades understanding exactly who put you in that position and exactly how you feel about it. He is not ranting. He is not unhinged. He is calm in the specific way that sustained hatred produces calm. Everything burned away except the one fixed point. Alpheus listens. He does not argue the history. Whatever happened 40 years ago, whatever his role in it was, he does not perform innocence about it. He carries it. That's visible. What he says, when he speaks, is quiet. He says that Arcane has wasted 40 years on this, that what he's become, the darkness, the disciples, the attack on students who have nothing to do with what happened, is not justice. It is what's left when a brilliant mind decides that one wound is more important than everything else. Arcane is not interested in this assessment. He expands. Dark magic at rank 3 is not comparable to anything the students of this academy have encountered in a classroom context. It is not the illegal artifacts that Jake Adria used in the mountains. It is not the shadow creatures that Canis and Aaron deploy. It is the real thing, fully developed, carried in a body that has been feeding it for 4 decades. Dark mana so dense it warps the spatial field around Arcane like gravity, pulling light inward, creating a localized distortion that the bridge's physical structure starts to crack under. Alpheus meets it. Big Bang. The name is Alpheus's own designation for the technique, and it is not metaphorical. What it does is expand. Everything. His zone, fully unsealed, pushes outward in all directions simultaneously, at densities that the air itself resists, a sphere of absolute spatial pressure that meets Arcane's dark field, and does not yield to it, does not bend around it, does not calculate an angle of approach. It simply expands against it. The collision between the two fields is not loud. It is the opposite of loud, a silence with pressure behind it, the sound that would result if sound itself got compressed beyond the point where it could propagate. The bridge shakes. The canyon walls register it. Students halfway recovered from the memory suppression feel it in their chests as a single deep pulse. Arcane pushes more into his field. He has been sustaining this for 40 years, feeding it, and his reserves are not shallow. He matches Alpheus's expansion with his own, and for a moment, a genuine moment, not a comfortable one for anyone watching, it holds equal. Then Alpheus does something Arcane doesn't expect. He stops calculating. Not the way Shirone stops calculating in Nirvana. This is different. It's not the immortal function, it's something else. It's the specific surrender of a mage who has been suppressing his true capacity for so long that when he finally releases it fully, there is no technical framework left underneath it. Just the raw capacity itself, unmediated, pointed outward. Big Bang, fully released, is not a technique. It is what Alpheus actually is, expressed without restraint. Arcane's field breaks. Not gradually. The dark mana that has been his identity and his weapon for 4 decades shatters under the expansion, and the feedback from a shattered mana field at that density travels back through the connection to its source, which is Arcane's mind. And the mind that built and maintained that field is not equipped to survive its sudden dissolution. The brain overloads, simply, mechanically, overwhelmingly. The mana feedback hits his neural architecture and exceeds its capacity, and Arcane goes down. He does not get back up. He dies on the bridge, on his back, looking at the sky over the canyon, with the expression of someone who got what they came for and found it wasn't what they needed. There is something almost peaceful about it, which is more than he deserves and possibly exactly what he needed. Canis and Aaron watch their mentor die from their positions on the bridge. The shadow creatures dissolve. Harvey and Kaleida, unmaintained, losing coherence without the mana thread that held them. Canis makes a sound that is not a word. Arn is completely still. They do not fight after that. There is nothing left in them that wants to fight. Alpheus walks past Arcane's body toward them, and they do not raise their hands. They stand there and let themselves be taken, and the specific quality of their surrender is not defeat, it's grief, raw and unprocessed. The grief of people who organize their entire lives around one person and are now standing in the space where that person used to be. The legal resolution is handled later, with the precision that institutional processes bring to unusual situations. Canis and Aaron, as Arcane's disciples, face association charges regarding the attack on the Academy. The evidence against them is substantial. Their defense, that they acted out of loyalty to someone they believed in, rather than independent malicious intent, is noted and partially accepted. They sign away their inheritance rights, everything Arcane accumulated, properties, artifacts, theoretical materials, gets transferred to the Academy as partial restitution. In exchange, the association charges are reduced to a level that permits them to exist outside of confinement, which is the best outcome available to them. Shirone is not present for any of this. Shirone is dead, not permanently, but the clinical distinction between not permanently dead and alive is, in the hours following the bridge event, not entirely clear to anyone who examines him. His heart stopped during the photon field extension, and it has not restarted. His zone is still faintly present, not deployed, not doing anything, just the residual extension of a spiritual consciousness that hasn't fully detached yet. His body is breathing, slightly, in a rhythm that is too slow and too shallow to be called normal, but too regular to be called dying. He is in Nirvana, the full immortal function, not the controlled threshold touching of the speed test but complete entry, the dissolution of the boundary between individual consciousness and universal perception that Othello warned him about in their first serious conversation. His awareness is somewhere that isn't the bridge, and isn't the canyon, and isn't anywhere that has a physical address. The Academy brings in its medical personnel. They examine him carefully and cannot produce a clear determination. His vital signs are minimal but present. His mana signature is active but not localized. He is in a state that the medical literature has case reports for. Other mages, across history, who reached Nirvana fully and entered this indeterminate state. But the case reports don't provide a reliable protocol because the cases don't resolve consistently. Some mages came back, some didn't. Amy sits next to him. She is there when they move him to the medical wing. She is there through the first night, which is long and quiet and punctuated by periodic checks from staff, who look at the readings and don't say what they're thinking. She holds his hand, which is warm. His body is maintaining temperature, which is one of the signs that the connection to physical existence hasn't fully severed. She talks to him, not continuously, but in the unplanned way that people talk to someone they're not sure can hear them, saying things that have been pending for a while, things that the ordinary social structure of being alive and present in the same space makes difficult to say directly. She tells him that she recognized him the day he walked into Class 7. She tells him about the alley. She tells him that she handled his arrival badly, and that she knew she was handling it badly, and did it anyway, because that is, historically, one of her specific failure modes. She tells him to come back. She is there through the second night, and the third, and the fourth. The Academy staff gently suggests she sleep somewhere other than the chair next to his bed. She acquires a blanket and stays in the chair. Iruki, meanwhile, is handling the situation in the way Iruki handles everything, by treating it as a problem with a solution and refusing to accept any framing that suggests otherwise. He has two concerns. The first is theoretical, understanding what Shirone is experiencing in Nirvana well enough to know what the conditions are for his return. The second is immediate and urgent. On day 3, a formal institutional review is convened to determine whether Shirone's continued physical presence in the medical wing is warranted, given that his vital signs are so minimal that several faculty members are suggesting, carefully, medically, with appropriate academic distance, that his condition should be reclassified. Reclassified means declared dead. Iruki walks into that review session with materials he has spent 2 days assembling. Royal Commission correspondence, letters from certified mage researchers regarding documented Nirvana cases, obtained through official academic channels that Iruki accessed by writing 17 letters in 3 days to various institutional contacts. Biopsy data from the Academy's medical records. Tissue samples taken from Shirone that show cellular activity inconsistent with clinical death. Specifically, a pattern of metabolic suspension that appears in documented Nirvana cases as distinct from cellular shutdown. He presents these materials to the review committee with the specific energy of someone who has done the math and is now explaining the math to people who haven't done it and need to catch up. His argument: Shirone is not dead. He is in time-dilated nirvana, a state of perceptual expansion where subjective time does not correspond to external time. His body is in metabolic suspension, not shutdown, suspension, because his consciousness has relocated to a perceptual field that doesn't require the same metabolic rate as ordinary physical life. The cellular data supports this. The mana signature supports this. The literature supports this. Declaring him dead would be an error. A recoverable error, potentially, if he returns on his own, but an error with irreversible consequences if acted upon. The committee listens. Some members are skeptical. Some are moved. The deciding factor is Alpheus, who has been present throughout, and who, when the committee turns to him for a final determination, says simply that Shirone is not to be touched. Full stop. No further discussion required. The review closes without the reclassification. Iruki goes back to the GPS workspace and writes up the complete theoretical framework for what Shirone is experiencing, partly because it might help, and partly because this is how Iruki processes things that frighten him. Need sits next to him while he writes and doesn't say much. This is Need's version of the same thing Olena does with food, making sure the person doing the hard thing knows they're not alone. Inside the Nirvana state, Shirone is somewhere that doesn't have geography, the point dimension. This is the name that the theoretical literature gives to the perceptual space of full immortal function, a dimensionality where the spatial coordinates that organize physical reality collapse to a single point, where everywhere is here and every when is now, and the distinctions that make individual experience possible are present as concepts but not as felt boundaries. It is not comfortable. Athela's warning was accurate and not exaggerated. The dissolution is real. Shirone can feel, in whatever mode of feeling applies here, that the boundary of himself is not fixed. That the I that he identifies as Shirone Aryan is a localized pattern in something much larger, and that larger thing is patient and indifferent and would accept his pattern dissolving into it without any particular resistance. He meets Miro. She is something. The first president of the Supernatural Research Group, a student of Alpheus who disappeared years ago after reaching the immortal function. She is in the point dimension in a way that is not the same as Shirone's way, not visiting, not suspended, but resident. She has been here long enough to adapt to it, to develop a relationship with the dissolution rather than fighting it, to construct out of infinite perception something that functions like a personality and a perspective. She calls herself a god. Not with ego, with the specific accuracy of someone describing their functional status. In the point dimension, with access to the entire perceptual field simultaneously, she is something that does not have a better word available. She is not hostile. She is curious about Shirone in the way that genuinely powerful things are curious about genuinely unusual things. Interested, attentive, but not invested in any particular outcome for him. She could help him. She could also simply observe what happens if she doesn't. She asks him why he wants to go back. It's a real question, asked with real curiosity. From her position, the physical world is small and temporary, and the point dimension is infinite and permanent. Why would a consciousness that has touched this choose to return to the limited and the mortal? Shirone's answer is not philosophical. It's specific. He names them: Vincent and Olena in the small house, Ryan's sword in the stone floor, Iruki running dual-zone calculations while insisting that the math is always enough, Need with his invisibility cloak and his radar for interesting minds, Sienna, ice-sharp and furious on his behalf, Athela's careful warnings, Amy's red eyes and her chair next to his bed and the things she said that he could hear, across whatever distance Nirvana creates, faint but there. He doesn't want infinity, he wants them. Miro listens to this list. She is quiet for a moment that doesn't have a duration in any meaningful sense. Then she tells him what he needs to do. The Nirvana state has dissolved the normal boundaries of his perception, which means returning to his body requires reconstructing them, willfully, from the inside, accepting the limitations of individual experience as a choice rather than a default. It is the opposite of everything the immortal function does. It requires moving faster than light in a perceptual sense, outrunning the expansion of the zone to re-establish the localized point of self. It hurts. The reconstruction of ego after dissolution is not a comfortable process. Shirone describes it later as feeling like something very large being compressed into something very small, and every part of the compression process registering as resistance. He does it anyway. He picks up each limitation deliberately. This is where my zone ends. This is my name. This is what I weigh. This is the specific texture of my parents' house in the forest. And he walks back toward them. On day 10, Shirone's heart restarts. Not dramatically. The monitors in the medical wing register the rhythm change, and the attending staff checks, and checks again, and the rhythm is sustained, and then it deepens, and then his breathing changes quality from the shallow metabolic suspension to something that is actually breathing. Amy, who has been there through all 10 days, who has barely left the chair, is holding his hand when his fingers move. She doesn't say anything. She doesn't need to. Shirone opens his eyes and the first thing he sees is the ceiling of the medical wing, and the second thing he sees is Amy, and the expression on her face is the kind that gets filed away permanently. The specific look of someone who has been frightened for a long time and is only now, in this moment, allowing themselves to stop being frightened. He says her name. His voice is rough from 10 days of minimal use. She tells him, with the composure of someone who has been storing things up for 10 days and is now very carefully not releasing all of them at once, that he is an idiot. He agrees. Recovery is not instant. His body has been in metabolic suspension for 10 days, and the mana channels are not happy about it. There is a period of genuine physical weakness, careful nutritional rebuilding, and monitored zone activity, as his perceptual framework re-establishes its normal parameters. He is not permitted to do anything interesting with his zone for a defined period, which he accepts with more patience than anyone expected. The GPS visits are daily. Iruki brings his notes. Need brings food that is technically not permitted in the medical wing, but that he smuggles in with the systematic competence he applies to everything. They sit around Shirone's bed and argue about theory, and it is exactly what it should be. Alpheus visits once, alone, in the evening. They talk for a long time. About Miro, Alpheus had suspected her fate for years, and Shirone's confirmation of what she's become in the point dimension carries a grief that Alpheus manages with the same quiet steadiness he manages everything. About the immortal function, and what it means that Shirone went there fully and came back, which puts him in a very small historical category of mages who have done that and survived. About what comes next. What comes next, once Shirone is cleared for full academic participation, is the Class 4 promotion exam. He has been formally assessed as ready to advance, and the exam is a structured test of everything he's developed: zone work, photon applications, spatial calculation, elemental theory. He takes it with the focused calm of someone who has been in Nirvana and back, and finds formal academic assessments comparatively manageable. He passes, first in his cohort. Iruki also passes. His formal review of what happened in the speed test and the bridge event has produced something unexpected in his theoretical framework. Not an abandonment of mathematical rigor, but an integration. He has developed a modified approach that incorporates perceptual intuition as a distinct layer alongside calculation, a dual-zone variant that treats the non-numerical as a valid input rather than an anomaly to be resolved. It is, he notes with characteristic precision, 6% more efficient than his previous method in early testing. He tells Shirone this with the air of someone conceding a point while simultaneously claiming partial credit for the concession, which is so specifically Iruki that Shirone doesn't even try to argue with it. Need passes too, quietly and without drama, which is exactly how Need does most things. The three of them, Class 4 official, stand in the GPS workspace the evening after results are posted. The chalkboards are covered in equations from the current research threads. The devices on the surfaces are in various states of assembly. The room looks exactly the same as it always does. Need suggests they need to celebrate. Iruki asks what the optimal form of celebration is given their individual preference profiles and available resources. Shirone says that Amy mentioned something about a trip. Galeonte Island sits about 2 days' travel from the mainland by standard transport. far enough that it feels genuinely separate from the continent's political weight. The noble hierarchies, the academic pressure, the association rankings and certified mage bureaucracy that structure everything on the mainland. It's a different kind of place, older. The kind of island that has been inhabited long enough that the human construction layered on top of it feels recent compared to what's underneath. What's underneath, specifically, is the Kergo Ruins. The Kergo civilization predates the current continental framework by a margin that historians find uncomfortable to specify, precisely because the margin keeps growing as more gets excavated. What they built, how they built it, and what happened to them are all active research questions. The ruins on Galeonte Island are one of the most significant unexcavated sites remaining, significant enough that the academic establishment has been arguing about access protocols for decades, while the ruins sit there, patient and uninterested in the argument. Shirone wants to go because of Miro. The point dimension conversation left him with questions that the GPS workspace can't answer. What Miro is, how she got there, what the immortal function actually connects to at its deepest level. These questions have a thread that runs, according to certain very old theoretical texts that Shirone has been reading obsessively since his recovery, back toward Kergo research. The civilization that preceded the current magical framework had their own understanding of perceptual expansion, their own relationship with the kind of infinite domain that the immortal function touches. He has been building a case for why the Kergo ruins are relevant to his photon theory, to the GPS research agenda, and to understanding what Miro has become. The case is solid. He has documented it thoroughly. He also just wants to leave campus for a while and be somewhere that isn't the medical wing or the faculty review committee's area of interest. Amy proposes the trip with the efficiency of someone who has already done the logistical planning before proposing it, which is so Amy that Shirone doesn't even question the sequencing. She has identified the travel route, the accommodation situation on Galeonte, the publicly accessible entry points to the Kergo site, and the estimated time window before the academic calendar requires their return. Ryan is coming. This was not in question. When Shirone mentioned the trip in a letter, Ryan's response arrived with a speed that suggested he had been waiting for exactly this kind of invitation. He is bringing Tess, a friend of his from the Skyrim Swordsmanship Academy, who has been training alongside him through the zone awareness work he developed from his conversations with Shirone. Tess is precise, physically capable, and has the specific quality of someone who is very good at the practical aspects of situations that other people spend too long analyzing. The four of them make an unlikely traveling group. A commoner mage fresh from clinical death. A noble prodigy with a delinquent past and aggressive protective instincts. A noble sword heir with an ancient oath sworn to the commoner mage. A swordswoman who assesses every room she walks into for threat vectors and exits. They get on a boat. The crossing is 2 days, and the 2 days are good. There is something about being on water, away from the continent's institutional weight, that loosens the specific tension that academy life produces. Amy reads. Shirone watches the water and runs quiet zone calculations that aren't really calculations. Just the zone extended out across the surface, feeling the movement of the waves, the depth below, the life in the water. Not working, just perceiving, resting in the thing he is, without any pressure to deploy it. Ryan tries to explain his sword training progress to Shirone using terminology that mixes swordsmanship vocabulary with the zone awareness concepts Shirone gave him, producing descriptions that are technically coherent, but which Tess listens to with the expression of someone who has been hearing this for months and has developed a very specific brand of fond exasperation. Shirone asks good questions. Ryan gets more animated. Tess corrects the technical inaccuracies with the efficiency of someone who has given up trying to stop the conversation and has settled for keeping it accurate. Amy watches all of this from behind her book and does not pretend she isn't watching. Galeonte is beautiful in the way that places with complicated histories are sometimes beautiful. Layered, textured, with a quality of depth that purely scenic places don't have. The main settlement on the island is a port town built over and around Kergo-era foundations, so that ancient stone peeks through the more recent construction in ways that are sometimes decorative and sometimes structural and sometimes clearly neither, just present, because removing it would require effort that nobody has gotten around to. They find accommodation. Simple, clean, with windows that face the water and a communal eating area, where the island's small permanent population mixes with the occasional researchers and traders who pass through. The landlady is a woman of approximately 60, who has clearly seen many varieties of mainland visitor and has strong opinions about all of them that she shares freely and without being asked. She takes one look at their group, specifically at the way Ryan positions himself relative to Shirone and the way Amy positions herself relative to everyone, and says, with the confidence of someone whose read of people has been refined by decades of running a guest house on an island where interesting things periodically happen, that they should be careful. When asked to elaborate, she says that the ruins have had visitors lately. Not researchers, not tourists. The kind of visitors who travel in groups and carry equipment that isn't academic and ask questions about timing and access points rather than history. This is useful information delivered at exactly the right moment, which Shirone files away in the part of his mind that tracks things that are probably going to matter later. The Kergo site is a half-day's walk from the port settlement into the island's interior, where the vegetation gets older and denser and the light quality changes. The ruins themselves emerge gradually rather than appearing suddenly. First as anomalies in the ground, stone patterns that don't match the island's natural geology, then as partial walls, then as something that is clearly structural even in its broken state. The main site is larger than Shirone expected. Even in ruin, the scale of what was here is evident. Not a settlement, but something closer to a complex organized around a central structure whose purpose isn't immediately clear, but whose design is oriented with a precision that has survived whatever destroyed the rest of it. Shirone extends his zone and immediately understands why the academic establishment has been arguing about access protocols. The ruins are mana active. Not dangerously, not in any way that registers as threatening, but the stone carries residual mana signatures that are old in a way that his zone has no prior reference for. The Kergo built with materials that interact with spiritual fields in a way that current construction theory doesn't replicate and possibly doesn't fully understand. His zone moves through the site and comes back with information that he doesn't have complete vocabulary for. He starts mapping it, pulling out his notes and marking what his zone tells him against the physical layout, building a picture of the site that is simultaneously architectural and perceptual. Ryan and Tess take up positions that are not accidental. They are watching the approaches to the site while appearing to simply explore it. Ryan has done this before, in contexts that his training has prepared him for, and Tess does it as naturally as breathing. Amy is examining the central structure. She has her own theoretical framework for what they're looking at. She has been reading Kergo scholarship, formally and thoroughly, in the weeks since Shirone first mentioned this trip, and she has questions that the scholarship doesn't answer that she is now trying to answer directly. She calls Shirone over. The central structure's interior wall carries carvings. Not decorative, functional, in the way that technical diagrams are functional. They depict something that, looked at casually, reads as abstract pattern. Looked at with the zone extended and the perceptual framework of someone who has been in the immortal function and back, reads as something else entirely. A map, not geographical, dimensional. A representation of the relationship between physical space and the perceptual field that the immortal function accesses, rendered in a visual language that is different from anything in the current academic tradition, but arriving at the same structural understanding through completely different means. The Kergo knew about the point dimension. Shirone stands in front of this wall for a long time, longer than he usually stands still, which is already longer than most people. Amy stands next to him and doesn't rush him. This is one of the things about Amy that is easy to miss under the sharp edges and the aggressive competence. She knows when to be still. She knows when something is happening in someone else that requires space rather than input. He traces the diagram with his eyes, not touching it, running his zone across the carved surface to feel the mana signatures in the stone. The Kergo used the ruins the way he uses his photon field, as a medium that has perceptual mass. The stone isn't just carved. It's tuned. The carvings aren't just depictions, they're configurations. This place is a spiritual zone in physical form, fossilized perception, a structure that, if you knew how to read it, would tell you not just what the Kergo understood about the infinite domain, but how to reach it, and, this is the part that catches Shirone's breath, how to come back. He is in the middle of this realization when Ryan says, quietly and clearly from his position at the site's perimeter, that they have company. Not the landlady's ambiguous visitors. These are specific. a group approaching from the northern access path, moving with the organized efficiency of people who have done this before. Their equipment, as Ryan catalogs it in his quick, precise way, includes things that are not academic and not touristic, and are in fact the kind of equipment that people bring when they expect to take something from a place and expect resistance to that taking. Mercenaries. 8 of them, armed with a combination of conventional weapons and anti-mana artifacts that Shirone's zone reads immediately. The same category as what Jake Adria used in the mountains, though different manufacture, different configuration. They are not here by coincidence. Someone sent them to the Kergo Ruins at this specific time with specific instructions, and the instructions clearly include provisions for dealing with mages. Their leader steps forward. He is professional about it. No unnecessary aggression, no performance of threat. He simply states that the site is under private claim as of 3 days ago, that the claim is registered with the island's administrative authority, and that the group currently inside the perimeter is trespassing and needs to vacate. Ryan asks, very politely, to see the documentation for this private claim. The leader produces it. It is, on inspection, real documentation, actual administrative filing, actual seal, actual registration. Someone has been planning this for weeks. The Kergo site, which has been in a bureaucratic access argument for decades, has been quietly claimed through a loophole in the island's property law that the mainland academic establishment, focused on their own argument, didn't notice being exploited. Shirone reads the claim document carefully. He reads fast, always, and he reads thoroughly, and what he finds in the fine print is that the claim's registered purpose is recovery of historical artifacts. Specifically, artifacts classified under a category that on the mainland would require association oversight and permits that these mercenaries clearly do not have. This is illegal. Clearly, specifically, documentably illegal under continental law. The island's local administrative authority apparently either didn't notice or was encouraged not to notice. Tess says, in a tone that is purely informational, that the artifact classification on the document matches things that are sold to certain kinds of buyers for certain kinds of purposes, and that the buyers in question are not academic institutions. Dark mage buyers. Artifact collectors whose interest in Kergo materials is not historical. Ryan's hand moves to his sword, not drawing it, just the specific positioning of someone who has moved past assessment and into readiness. Shirone is watching the mercenaries and thinking several things simultaneously. He is thinking about the carving on the central structure wall and what it means and whether removing artifacts from this site damages the configuration in ways that can't be repaired. He is thinking about the anti-mana artifacts in the mercenaries' equipment and what they mean for his available responses. He is thinking about the landlady's warning and how someone on the island or near it fed this group their timing, and then, from a position behind the mercenary group that nobody had been watching because nobody knew to watch it, a woman's voice cuts through the sight. Marcia. She walks out of the tree line with the easy confidence of someone who has been in this position before and found it comfortable. She is not with the mercenaries, that's immediately clear, because the mercenary leader's reaction to her appearance is the specific controlled non-reaction of someone who has been told to expect a complicating factor and is now seeing it arrive. She is the complicating factor. Marcia, the corrupted virgin, A-rank criminal, leader of what everyone who knows her past calls the Parrot Gang, because the original Parrot Gang was destroyed years ago and Marcia rebuilt it in her own image from the people she collected afterward, looks at Shirone with an expression that is difficult to categorize. Not hostile, not predatory, something more complicated and more unsettling than either. She looks at him the way someone looks at a family member they've been separated from for a long time. Proprietary, warm in a way that has no regard for whether the warmth is welcome. The look of someone who has already decided what the relationship is and is simply informing the other party. She says his name, not Shirone. A different name, one she has assigned, in her head, in whatever framework she uses to organize her understanding of the people she claims. A name that positions him in a family structure that she has constructed, populated with people she has collected through the same process, and which she protects with the absolute violence that trauma-built families tend to be protected with. Shirone has never met her. He knows who she is. GPS did research on the Parrot Gang when they were trying to understand the Continental Criminal Network's relationship to Dark Mage artifact supply chains. He knows her history, roughly, a background defined by the kind of loss that restructures a person's relationship with attachment. A response to that loss that involved building a replacement through means that the law has very strong opinions about. He understands, immediately, that this is not a simple criminal confrontation. This is someone whose psychology he needs to read correctly, or the situation will escalate in ways that his photon cannon is not actually the right tool for. Amy, who is standing at his shoulder, reads the same thing. She doesn't move, doesn't escalate, but her zone is deployed, and Shirone can feel the edges of it. Controlled, precise, ready. Marcia explains, in the unhurried way of someone who has thought about this conversation beforehand, that the mercenaries work for her, that the Kergo site claim is hers, that she has been aware of Shirone's existence for some time and has been waiting for an appropriate moment to make this introduction, that she would like him to come with her, away from the ruins, away from his current companions, and hear what she has to say about the family she's offering him. The word offering is careful, chosen. It does not match the 8 armed mercenaries deployed around the site's perimeter. Ryan says, in a voice that is very calm and very clear, that Shirone will not be going anywhere. The ancient out-night oath, sworn in the Ogent family hall, covers this situation implicitly and explicitly. Ryan Ogent drew his sword against his own father's authority to keep Shirone alive. 8 mercenaries and an A-rank criminal are not a more complicated calculation. Tess shifts her position 3 feet to the left without appearing to shift, which puts her at an angle relative to the nearest mercenary that anyone who understands spatial combat geometry recognizes as deliberate. Marcia looks at Ryan and Tess with the specific attention of someone assessing obstacles rather than people. Not cruel, just professional about the categorization. She looks at Amy and pauses slightly longer, because Amy is harder to categorize and Marcia's radar for difficulty is well calibrated. Then she looks back at Shirone, and her expression changes. The proprietary warmth is still there, but under it, visible if you know what you're looking at, is something that is not warmth at all. The specific loneliness of someone who has built their entire life around the idea of family and knows, in the part of themselves that is still honest, that what they've built isn't quite that. She says he should think about it, that the offer is real, that she's not going anywhere, that Galeante Island is small enough that their paths will cross again regardless of what happens today. She does not press the mercenaries to move. She does not escalate. She simply lets the moment sit, fully loaded, and then steps back into the tree line and is gone. The mercenaries, without their principal present to give updated instructions, hold their positions but don't advance. Shirone looks at the site around him. The carvings on the central wall that are a map of the infinite domain. The mana-active stone that carries knowledge the current academic world doesn't fully have access to. The administrative claim documentation that someone with resources and planning capability filed weeks ago. He looks at Ryan, who has his hand on his sword and his feet in the specific stance that means he has already decided to fight if the decision is required. He looks at Amy, whose red eyes are watching him with the expression he has learned to read over months of classroom proximity and medical wing chairs, not asking what he wants to do, because she knows what he wants to do, but checking whether he's okay while he decides how to do it. He looks at Tess, who is watching the mercenaries with the attentive stillness of a person who is very good at her specific job and is being patient. The ruins are behind them, patient in the way that ancient things are patient, carrying their configuration of fossilized perception, waiting to be read by someone who knows the language. The mercenaries are in front of them, holding a legal document that is illegal in practice, waiting for instruction that isn't coming from the tree line anymore. And somewhere on Galeante Island, Marcia is walking away from this confrontation with the unhurried pace of someone who has already decided that today is not the last day of this conversation. The island is small. The ruins have more to reveal. The Parrot Gang is mobilizing somewhere in the interior, with resources that an A-rank criminal spends years accumulating. And Shirone Aryan, commoner, Class 4 mage, speed test record holder, the only person in recent history to enter full Nirvana and walk back out of it, stands in the middle of a Kergo site that might hold the answer to what Miro has become, with his sword brother at his back and his closest friend at his side. He tells the mercenary leader that their claim documentation has a jurisdictional problem that will be visible to anyone who checks the Continental Association's artifact classification registry against the island's administrative authority, and that he would strongly recommend they contact their principal for updated instructions rather than proceed with whatever they were planning to do next. The mercenary leader looks at him for a moment, then looks at Ryan's hand on his sword, then looks at Tess's position, which has not changed but which he is clearly now understanding the geometry of. He says they will be in contact with their principal. He does not say they are leaving. Shirone nods once, as if this is perfectly satisfactory, and turns back toward the central structure and the wall with the map of the infinite domain carved into ancient stone, because there is more to read, and the afternoon light is good, and whatever comes next, it is going to require him to understand what the Kergo knew.